The gunshot echoed across the Montana prairie, sending a flock of startled birds into the autumn sky as August Steele spun his pistol and returned it to his holster. He stood tall against the backdrop of the setting sun, his silhouette cut sharp against the golden horizon of 1876, a man whose legend as the fastest draw in Whisper Creek had only grown in the years since he'd hung up his badge and retreated to his homestead on the outskirts of town. "That'll do for today," August muttered to himself, surveying the row of tin cans he'd systematically obliterated, a ritual he maintained despite no longer wearing a lawman's star. At 32, the former deputy had traded gunfights for fence mending and cattle herding, yet some habits died harder than others. The wind carried the familiar scent of pine and prairie grass as he gathered the remaining intact cans. His ranch wasn't much a sturdy cabin, a modest barn and enough land to run a respectable herd, but it was his, bought and paid for with years of dangerous work and careful saving. Isolation suited August, whose broad shoulders carried the invisible weight of decisions made and lives taken in the name of justice. He whistled for his horse, a dappled gray stallion named Thunder, who trotted dutifully to his side. As August swung into the saddle, he cast one last glance at the horizon, where the first stars were beginning to appear in the deepening blue. "Come on, boy. Supper won't cook itself." The ride home was short but peaceful, the kind of quiet August had come to appreciate after years of saloon brawls and outlaw pursuits. His cabin came into view, solid logs chinked with mud, a stone chimney, and a front porch where he often sat watching thunderstorms roll across the plains. Smoke curled from the chimney. His ranch hand, old Josiah, would have started the evening fire. August dismounted, leading Thunder to the barn. He removed the saddle with practiced movements, brushed down his faithful companion, and ensured the horse had fresh hay and water before heading toward the cabin. The scent of beans and coffee greeted him as he pushed open the door. Josiah, a weathered man in his 60s who'd fought in the Mexican-American War before drifting north, nodded in greeting. "Any trouble in town today?" August asked, hanging his hat on a peg by the door. "Quiet as a church mouse," Josiah replied, stirring the pot of beans. "Though Pete at the Mercantile mentioned the stage is running late. Might be the creek's high after yesterday's rain." August grunted acknowledgement, washing trail dust from his hands in a basin of water. His thoughts drifted to 5 years earlier, when he'd still been Whisper Creek's deputy. Those had been different times, dangerous and unpredictable. Now, his days followed the rhythm of the seasons rather than the chaos of frontier justice. After a simple but satisfying supper, Josiah retired to his small room off the barn, leaving August alone with his thoughts and a tin cup of whiskey. He settled into the chair on his porch, watching as darkness claimed the land and the stars emerged in full brilliance overhead. His mind wandered, as it often did in these quiet moments, to Natalie Greene. 5 years had passed since she'd boarded that eastbound train, her green eyes filled with tears and determination, as she'd told him she couldn't wait forever for him to be ready for something more than stolen moments between his dangerous duties. "Boston will give me the opportunities I've dreamed of," she'd said, her voice breaking. "And you've made it clear your life is here." He'd let her go, convinced it was for the best. Natalie, daughter of the town's schoolteacher, had dreams that stretched beyond Montana territory, dreams of studying medicine, of a life less precarious than one shared with a lawman who might not come home each night. August drained his whiskey, the memory of her still sharp enough to sting. They'd been young, she just 19, and he 27 when they'd fallen into a love that burned hot and bright during that summer of 1871. By autumn, duty and ambition had pulled them in different directions. Sometimes he wondered where she was now, if she'd found the life she sought. If she ever thought of him. The sound of approaching hooves pulled him from his reverie. August's hand instinctively moved to his hip, where his Colt rested in its holster. Visitors after dark were rare and often trouble. A wagon appeared in the moonlight, moving slowly up the path to his cabin. August stood, squinting to make out the driver. It was a woman, he realized, handling the reins with confidence despite the growing darkness. Behind her, something or someone shifted beneath a blanket. The wagon came to a stop, and August stepped off his porch, one hand still hovering near his pistol. "Can I help you, madam?" he called, maintaining a cautious distance. The woman set the brake and gathered something from beside her, a bundle that August realized with a start was a child. She climbed down carefully, balancing her burden, and turned toward him. The moonlight caught her face, and August felt the ground shift beneath his feet. "Natalie," he breathed, scarcely trusting his eyes. She stood straighter, the child a boy of perhaps 4 or 5 clinging to her neck, face buried shyly against her shoulder. 5 years had changed her in subtle ways. Her face was thinner, more defined, her posture more assured. But her eyes, those remarkable green eyes, were exactly as he remembered them. "Hello, August," she said, her voice soft but steady. 1,000 questions flooded his mind, but his gaze was drawn to the child in her arms, a boy with a mop of dark hair who now peered curiously at him with eyes that seemed hauntingly familiar. "This is Adam," Natalie said, following his gaze. "My son." The implication hung in the air between them, heavy as thunder before a storm. August stared at the boy, taking in the shape of his jaw, the set of his shoulders, the curious intelligence in his eyes. "Is he?" August's voice faltered, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Is he mine?" Natalie's expression softened, a mixture of apprehension and something like hope crossing her features as she adjusted the child in her arms. "Yes," she whispered. "He's yours." The world seemed to stop spinning for a moment as August absorbed this revelation. He had a son. A boy who had lived nearly 5 years without knowing his father and whom August hadn't known existed until this moment. "May we come inside?" Natalie asked, breaking the stunned silence. "It's been a long journey and Adam needs to sleep." August nodded mutely, stepping aside to let them pass. He watched as Natalie carried their son into the cabin he'd built with his own hands, never imagining it would someday shelter the family he hadn't known he had. The door closed behind them, and August stood motionless under the vast Montana sky, his life irrevocably changed by a knock at his door. Inside the cabin, Natalie settled Adam on the small sofa near the fire, tucking a blanket around his already drowsy form. The boy's eyes were heavy with sleep, though they flickered occasionally to August, who stood awkwardly by the door, still struggling to process the situation. "He's been excited about meeting you," Natalie said softly, smoothing Adam's hair. "Though I think the journey has worn him out." August swallowed hard, finding his voice at last. "How? How did you find me? I heard you were in Boston." Natalie straightened, turning to face him fully. In the firelight, he could see the fine lines that had formed around her eyes, evidence of years filled with struggle and determination. "I was in Boston," she confirmed. "I completed my first 2 years of medical training there, but then I received a letter from my father last month. He's ill, August. I've come home to care for him." She paused, her hands clasped tightly before her, and to introduce Adam to his family. "Including me," August said, the words barely audible. Natalie nodded. "Including you, I should have told you about him sooner. I understand if you're angry." August ran a hand through his hair, his emotions too tangled to name. Anger was there. Yes, a hot flare of indignation that she'd kept this secret for so long. But beneath it lay wonder, fear, and an unexpected surge of protectiveness toward the sleeping child. "Why didn't you?" he asked finally, his voice carefully controlled. "Why keep him from me?" Natalie's eyes glistened in the firelight. "I found out I was expecting after I arrived in Boston. I wrote to you 3 times but received no reply. I thought perhaps you'd moved on, or—" She hesitated. "Or that you'd made your choice when you let me leave." August frowned, moving to the small cabinet where he kept his important papers. After a moment of searching, he withdrew a worn leather folder. "I never received any letters from you," he said, rifling through the contents until he found what he was looking for: 3 unopened envelopes, the paper yellowed with age. "These came while I was tracking the Blackwater gang into Canada. I was gone for months. By the time I returned, they told me you were engaged to a doctor in Boston." Natalie's face registered shock. "Engaged? I was never engaged." "That's what your father told me when I asked after you," August said, his brow furrowing. "Said you'd found a suitable match, a respected physician who could give you the life you deserved." Understanding dawned in Natalie's eyes, followed quickly by a flash of anger. "He lied to you, and he intercepted your replies to my letters." She shook her head, a bitter smile twisting her lips. "He never approved of you, August. He thought I was throwing away my future on a man who'd likely die with his boots on before he was 30. So he made sure you believed I didn't care," August concluded, the pieces falling into place. A wave of lost time washed over him. 5 years when he could have known his son, when they could have been a family. Adam stirred in his sleep, drawing their attention. The boy's face relaxed in slumber, innocent of the complicated history unfolding around him. "What happens now?" August asked, looking from the child to Natalie. She met his gaze steadily. "That depends on what you want, August. I didn't come here expecting anything. I couldn't keep him from you any longer, especially now that I'm back in Montana. He deserves to know his father." August moved closer, kneeling beside the sofa where his son slept. He studied the boy's features: the straight nose, the firm chin, the dark lashes resting against his cheeks. He saw himself there, but Natalie too, in the curve of his mouth and the arch of his brows. "I want to know him," August said simply, his voice rough with emotion. "I want to be his father." Natalie nodded, relief visible in the softening of her shoulders. "We're staying with my father in town for now. You can visit whenever you'd like, and perhaps Adam could spend time here when he's more comfortable with you." August nodded, his mind already racing ahead to the changes he'd need to make: a proper bedroom for a child, toys, books. The cabin that had seemed perfectly adequate for a solitary man now struck him as woefully unprepared for visits from a curious 5-year-old. "I'd like that," he said, then hesitated before adding, "And what about us, Natalie? Where do we stand?" The question hung between them, weighted with history and possibility. Natalie's gaze dropped to her hands. "I don't know," she admitted. 5 years is a long time. We've both changed." "Some things haven't," August said quietly, and their eyes met in the firelight, acknowledging the current that still ran between them, undiminished by time or distance. Adam murmured in his sleep, breaking the moment. Natalie smiled fondly at their son before turning back to August. "It's late and we should get back to town before it's full dark," she said. "Would tomorrow be too soon? For you to come meet him properly, I mean." "No," August replied immediately. "Tomorrow would be fine. I'll come to your father's house after noon." Natalie nodded, gently gathering Adam into her arms. The boy stirred but didn't wake, instinctively curling against his mother's shoulder. August walked them to the wagon, helping Natalie up to the seat with Adam still cradled against her. Their hands touched briefly in the exchange, sending a familiar warmth through his veins. "Drive carefully," he said, stepping back. "The creek might still be high." "We will," she promised, gathering the reins. She hesitated, then added softly, "He has your eyes, you know. It's like looking at you sometimes." With that, she clicked to the horses, and the wagon pulled away into the night, leaving August standing in the yard, his life transformed in ways he was only beginning to comprehend. The following morning found August up with the dawn, his mind having granted him little rest. He moved through his chores with distracted efficiency, feeding the livestock and mending a section of fence that had needed attention for weeks. By mid-morning he was in the barn, saddling Thunder for the ride to town. "Going somewhere special?" Josiah asked, noting August's freshly shaved face and clean shirt. August hesitated, then decided the old man deserved to know. Natalie Greene returned to Whisper Creek. "She came by last night." He drew a deep breath. "With my son." Josiah's weathered face registered surprise, then a knowing nod. "Wondered when that shoe would drop," he said cryptically. "Saw her in town 2 days ago with a little one in tow. Spitting image of you at that age. You knew." August demanded, pausing in his work. The old ranch hand shrugged. "Suspected. Timing was right, and the boy has your look about him." He fixed August with a shrewd gaze. "What are you planning to do about it?" It was a question August had wrestled with through the sleepless night. "Get to know him," he said simply. "Be his father however I can." "And the mother," Josiah pressed. "You never did get over that woman, far as I could tell." August tightened Thunder's girth strap with more force than necessary. "That's complicated." "Life generally is," Josiah agreed mildly. "Just remember, second chances don't come around often in this world." With that pearl of wisdom delivered, the old man returned to his work, leaving August to ponder his words as he mounted Thunder and set off for town. Whisper Creek had grown in the 5 years since Natalie's departure. What had once been little more than a cattle town with a single street now boasted a bank, a proper hotel, and even a small opera house. The railroad had come through 2 years earlier, bringing with it new prosperity and possibilities. August rode past the familiar storefronts, nodding to acquaintances who called greetings. His attention, however, was fixed on the white clapboard house at the edge of town where Herbert Greene had lived and taught for over 20 years. As he approached, August felt his pulse quicken. The house looked much the same: neat flower beds flanking the front walk, curtains in the windows, a porch swing moving gently in the breeze. It was the home where he'd first kissed Natalie, on that same porch swing, after walking her home from a town social. He tied Thunder to the hitching post and straightened his vest before mounting the steps. Before he could knock, the door opened, and Natalie stood before him, dressed in a simple blue dress that brought out the color in her eyes. "You're earlier than I expected," she said, a small smile playing at her lips. "Couldn't wait," August admitted honestly. "How is he this morning?" Excited, nervous, much like his father, I imagine. Her gaze softened. "Come in. He's helping my father with a puzzle in the sitting room." August followed her inside, removing his hat as he entered the familiar hallway. The house smelled of baking bread and the lemon polish Mrs. Greene had always used on the furniture. Natalie led him to the sitting room, where Herbert Greene sat in an armchair, a chess board between him and Adam, who was perched on a footstool. His face screwed up in concentration as he contemplated his next move. The old schoolteacher looked up as they entered, his expression tightening at the sight of August. Herbert's appearance shocked August. The once robust man had withered, his face gaunt and his hands visibly trembling as they rested on the arm of his chair. "Mr. Steele," Herbert acknowledged stiffly, his voice weaker than August remembered but no less formal. I understand congratulations are in order. Before August could respond, Adam looked up, his gaze landing on August with open curiosity. The boy had clearly been prepared for this meeting. There was recognition in his eyes, not surprise. "Are you really my father?" he asked directly, abandoning the chess game and standing to face August. The forthright question, delivered in a clear, confident voice, caught August off guard. He glanced at Natalie, who nodded encouragingly, then knelt to be at eye level with his son. "Yes, Adam, I am." He swallowed past the tightness in his throat. "And I'm very glad to meet you properly." The boy studied him with a serious expression that reminded August forcefully of Natalie when she was working through a problem. "Mother says you were a lawman who protected people. Is that true?" It was, yes. "I was the deputy sheriff here in Whisper Creek for 7 years. Adam processed this information with evident approval. "Do you still have your badge and gun?" A smile tugged at August's lips. "I hung up my badge when I left the job, but yes, I still have my gun." "Could you teach me to shoot someday?" Adam asked, his eyes lighting with interest. "When you're older," August and Natalie said simultaneously, then exchanged a look that held a hint of shared amusement. "Your mother's right," August added. "Guns aren't toys, but I could teach you to ride a horse if your mother agrees. I have a gentle mare that would be perfect for learning on." Adam's face brightened. "Mother, could I, please?" Natalie hesitated, then nodded. If your father thinks it's safe, then yes, but only if you listen to everything he tells you." "I will," Adam promised fervently, then turned back to August. "When can we start?" "How about this afternoon?" August suggested. "If it's all right with your mother, you could come out to my ranch and meet the horses. Stay for supper, too, if you'd like." "Can we, Mother?" Adam pleaded, his previous reserve completely dissolved in the face of this exciting prospect. Natalie smiled, though August noted a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. "I think that would be fine, but we should let your grandfather rest now. Why don't you go wash up for lunch?" Adam nodded, casting one more curious look at August before obediently leaving the room. As soon as he was out of earshot, Herbert cleared his throat. "I hope you understand what you're doing, Steele," he said, his voice carrying a warning despite its weakness. "That boy has gone 5 years without a father. Don't disappoint him now." August met the older man's challenging gaze. "I don't intend to, Mr. Greene. And with all due respect, Adam might have known his father sooner if certain letters had reached their intended recipient." Herbert didn't flinch from the accusation. "I did what I thought best for my daughter." A lawman's wife leads a precarious existence, always waiting, always wondering if her husband will come home in a pine box. "That wasn't your decision to make," Natalie interjected, her voice tight with suppressed anger. "You had no right to interfere." "Perhaps not," Herbert conceded, though without real contrition. "But what's done is done. The question now is what happens next." His penetrating gaze moved between his daughter and August. "Adam deserves stability. Whatever arrangements you two make should prioritize his well-being above all else." Despite his resentment toward the man who had deliberately separated him from Natalie and his son, August found he couldn't argue with Herbert's concern for Adam. "On that, at least, we agree," he said evenly. "Adam's welfare comes first." Herbert nodded, apparently satisfied for the moment. He pushed himself up from his chair with visible effort. "I'll retire to my room now. The doctor recommends I rest in the afternoons." He paused, looking at his daughter. "You'll wake me before you leave for Mr. Steele's ranch." "Of course, Father," Natalie assured him, moving to assist him. Herbert waved her off. "I can manage. You two have matters to discuss, I imagine." With dignity that belied his frail condition, he made his way from the room, leaving August and Natalie alone. A charged silence fell between them, broken only when Natalie moved to the window, gazing out at the garden. "He's dying," she said quietly. "Consumption. The doctor gives him perhaps 6 months." August joined her at the window, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "I'm sorry, Natalie. Whatever our differences, I know how much you love your father." She nodded, her profile softened by the afternoon light. "It's why I came back. He's too proud to admit it, but he needs me." She turned to face August. "And Adam needs to know his family, all of them, while there's still time." "Including me," August said, echoing their conversation from the previous night. "Especially you." Natalie's gaze was steady. "He's been asking about you since he was old enough to understand that other children had fathers. I've told him what I could, that you were brave, that you helped people, that you didn't know about him." August felt a pang at the thought of his son growing up with only stories of a father he'd never met. "What else would you like him to know about me?" A ghost of a smile touched Natalie's lips. "That's for you to show him, August. He'll form his own opinions quickly enough. Adam has always been remarkably perceptive for his age." "He seems it," August agreed, pride swelling unexpectedly in his chest. "He has your quick mind." "And your stubborn determination," Natalie countered, her expression softening. "Once he sets his mind to something, there's no dissuading him." Their eyes held for a moment, acknowledging the pieces of themselves they recognized in their son. August found himself studying the changes in Natalie, the confident set of her shoulders, the assured way she spoke, the knowledge in her eyes that hadn't been there at 19. "Tell me about Boston," he said suddenly. "Did you finish your medical studies?" Natalie shook her head. "Not completely. I completed 2 years at the New England Female Medical College before Adam was born. After that, it became complicated. I worked as an assistant to a doctor who was willing to continue my training informally, but it wasn't the same as formal education." "You'll go back to it someday?" August asked, hearing the determination still present beneath her words. "I hope to," she admitted. "There's a need for doctors out here, especially women doctors who can treat female patients with understanding." She hesitated. "But for now, my priorities are Adam and my father." August nodded, understanding all too well how life's demands could reshape one's plans. He'd once imagined a very different future for himself, perhaps rising to sheriff, or even marshal someday. Instead, he'd found peace in his quieter existence as a rancher. "And what about you?" Natalie asked, breaking into his thoughts. "You left the law. I admit I was surprised to hear it." August crossed to the mantelpiece, absently tracing the carved wood with one finger. "It was time," he said simply. "After that business with the Blackwater gang, something changed. I'd seen too much, done too much." He didn't elaborate on the haunting memories of that pursuit, the blood on the snow, the choices that still visited him in dreams. "Ranching suits me better. It's honest work." "You seem settled," Natalie observed, studying him with those perceptive green eyes. "I am," August confirmed, then added more softly, "or I was until last night." Their gazes met and held, the unspoken question hanging between them. Before either could address it, Adam's voice called from the kitchen, announcing that he was starving and could they please have lunch now. The tension broke as Natalie laughed, a familiar sound that stirred memories August had long tried to suppress. "Some things never change," she said. "He's always hungry, just like you were." "Still am," August admitted with a smile, following her toward the kitchen where their son waited. Lunch was a simple affair of cold chicken, bread, and fresh vegetables from Herbert's garden. August found himself enchanted by Adam's eager questions about ranch life. Did he have many horses? Were there wolves? Had he ever seen a bear? Just once, August told him, smiling at the boy's wide-eyed reaction. A big grizzly was getting into my beehives last summer. I fired a shot in the air to scare him off and haven't seen him since. You have bees? Adam asked, fascinated. A few hives. They make good honey and they help the wildflowers grow strong. Adam considered this with the serious expression that so reminded August of Natalie. Could I see them too? The bees, I mean. From a safe distance, August promised, glancing at Natalie for approval, which she granted with a slight nod. Maybe next time. Today, I thought we'd focus on meeting the horses. This suggestion met with enthusiastic agreement from Adam, who thereafter could barely sit still to finish his meal. So eager was he to begin their adventure. As they prepared to leave for the ranch, Natalie packing a small bag with a change of clothes for Adam. Just in case, August found himself watching the easy way mother and son interacted, the shorthand communication that had developed between them over 5 years of being each other's whole world. A complex emotion washed over him: regret for the time lost, gratitude that they were here now, and a fierce, protective feeling toward both of them that took him by surprise with its intensity. "Ready?" Natalie asked, breaking into his thoughts. She stood in the doorway, Adam's hand in hers, both looking at him expectantly. August nodded, suddenly unable to speak past the tightness in his throat. Instead, he held the door for them, watching as his son stepped out into the sunshine, ready to discover the world his father had built. The journey to August's ranch took on a different quality with Adam's excited presence. The boy rode in the wagon beside Natalie, pointing out interesting sights along the way: a hawk circling overhead, a rabbit darting into the brush, the distant mountains sharp against the blue sky. August rode thunder alongside them, answering Adam's steady stream of questions, and occasionally sharing glances with Natalie over their son's head, moments of shared amusement or parental pride that felt surprisingly natural despite their years apart. As they approached the ranch, August found himself seeing it through new eyes, assessing the sturdy cabin, the well-maintained fences, the small orchard he'd planted 3 years earlier, now beginning to bear fruit. It was a good place for a boy to spend his days, he decided. Room to run, things to learn, a creek for fishing and swimming in summer. Josiah was waiting by the barn, his weathered face breaking into a rare smile as the wagon pulled into the yard. "Company at last," the old man called, approaching as they came to a stop. "And who might this young fella be?" Adam straightened, clearly recognizing the importance of this first introduction. "I'm Adam Greene, sir," he said with careful politeness. "Mr. Steele is my father." Josiah's eyes crinkled at the corners. "Is that so? Well, young man, it's a pleasure to make your acquaintance. I'm Josiah Miller, your father's right-hand man around these parts." Adam accepted the handshake Josiah offered with solemn dignity. "Do you take care of the horses, Mr. Miller?" "Among other things. Been working with horses since before your father was born." Josiah winked at the boy. "But I reckon your pa wants to introduce you to the stock himself." "That right, August." August nodded, already leading Thunder toward the corral where a gentle chestnut mare grazed peacefully. "Thought I'd introduce Adam to Maple here. She's got the sweetest temperament of the bunch." "Good choice," Josiah agreed, then turned to Natalie with a respectful nod. "Miss Greene, been a while." "It has, Mr. Miller," Natalie acknowledged with a warm smile. "It's good to see you again." As August helped Adam climb the fence to get a better view of Maple, Josiah leaned closer to Natalie. "Boy favors his father something fierce," he observed quietly. "Got the same way of standing, shoulders all squared up like he's facing the world head-on." Natalie's expression softened as she watched her son listening intently to August's instructions on how to approach a horse. Yes, she agreed. I've noticed that too. For the next hour, August guided Adam through his first interaction with Maple, showing him how to let the horse become comfortable with his scent, how to offer an apple with a flat palm, how to stroke her neck with gentle, confident hands. The boy proved to be a natural, his initial nervousness quickly giving way to quiet joy as the mare accepted his offerings and eventually lowered her head to his level, allowing him to stroke her velvety nose. "She likes me," Adam exclaimed, his face alight with wonder. "She certainly does," August confirmed, a surge of paternal pride warming his chest. "Horses can tell when someone has a good heart." From her perch on the fence, Natalie watched the interaction with a mixture of emotions playing across her face: happiness at her son's delight, wistfulness for the years when father and son should have been sharing such moments, and something more complex when her gaze rested on August himself. The afternoon passed swiftly. After the horses, August showed Adam the beehives from a safe distance, explaining how the bees made honey and why they were important for the wildflowers and apple trees. Then came a tour of the cabin, with Adam expressing particular interest in August's collection of books, adventure tales, and histories that August promised he could borrow once he was reading well enough. As dusk approached, Josiah excused himself to prepare supper, leaving the small family to walk along the creek that marked the eastern boundary of August's property. Adam ran ahead, throwing stones into the water and watching the ripples expand, while August and Natalie followed at a more sedate pace. "He's having a wonderful time," Natalie observed, breaking a comfortable silence that had fallen between them. "I haven't seen him this excited in ages." "He's a remarkable boy," August said, watching as Adam discovered a frog and crouched to observe it with intense fascination. "You've done an amazing job raising him, Natalie." She shook her head slightly. "It hasn't been easy. There were times." She paused, then continued more softly. "There were times I almost wrote to you again, despite receiving no answer to my earlier letters. Times when he was sick, or when he'd ask questions about you that I couldn't fully answer." August felt a renewed surge of anger toward Herbert Greene for his interference, but pushed it aside. The past couldn't be changed. What mattered now was the future. "I wish I'd known," he said simply. "I would have come for you both." Natalie looked up at him, a question in her eyes. "Would you?" "Even with your duties here," in a heartbeat, August confirmed without hesitation. "Family comes before everything else, Natalie. I learned that from my father, if nothing else." They walked on in silence for a moment, both aware of the weight of his words. August's father had been a circuit judge, often absent for months at a time as he traveled across the territory, administering frontier justice. He died when August was 15, thrown from a horse on a remote trail, and August had always carried with him the regret of time not spent, words not said. "What happens now?" Natalie asked finally, echoing the question from the night before. "Adam clearly adores you already, and you seem happy with him." "I am," August acknowledged, watching as their son discovered a particularly interesting rock and held it up for their inspection. "More than I could have imagined." He waited until Adam had returned to his explorations before continuing, his voice lowered. "But there's more to consider than just Adam and me, isn't there? There's you, Natalie. There's us, whatever that means now." Natalie's pace slowed, her gaze fixed on the distant mountains turning gold in the setting sun. 5 years is a long time, August. We've both changed." "I'm not the same girl who left on that train." "I wouldn't expect you to be," August said quietly. "And I'm not the same man who let you go." He hesitated, then added, "But some things don't change, Natalie. What I felt for you then, what I still feel." "August," she interrupted, her voice unsteady. Please don't say things you might not mean. For Adam's sake, we need to be clear-headed about this." August stopped walking, gently catching her arm so she would face him. "I've never been more clear-headed in my life," he said, his voice low and intense. "Seeing you again, meeting our son, it's like waking up from a long sleep. These past 5 years I've been going through the motions, telling myself I was content. But I wasn't, Natalie, not really." Her eyes searched his face, looking for any sign of uncertainty. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want a real chance for us to be a family. You, me, and Adam." August took a deep breath, laying his heart bare. "I'm not proposing marriage, not yet. That would be too much, too soon. But I am asking if you'd consider staying here, in Whisper Creek, not just for your father or for Adam to know me, but to see if what we had could grow into something stronger." Natalie's expression softened, a complex mixture of hope and wariness in her eyes. "My father needs me now," she began, "and Adam's schooling. Your father can live at the ranch if needed," August said, the plan forming as he spoke. "The air out here might do him good, and Adam can attend school in town. I'll take him myself if necessary, or we could hire a tutor." He smiled slightly. "I'm not without resources, Natalie. The ranch does well, and I've saved most of what I earned as deputy." She shook her head, though not in refusal. "You've thought this through quickly." "Some decisions don't need much deliberation," August replied, his gaze steady on hers. Before Natalie could respond, Adam's voice called out excitedly, "Mother! Father! Look what I found!" Both turned to see their son hurrying toward them, something clutched carefully in his small hands. The word "father" from Adam's lips sent a jolt through August, the first time the boy had addressed him as such, spoken with such natural ease that it took his breath away. Adam reached them, opening his hands to reveal a perfect blue robin's egg. "It was on the ground," he explained. "Is the baby bird inside dead?" August knelt to examine the egg. "It's hard to say. Sometimes eggs fall before they're ready to hatch." He noticed a tiny crack in the shell. "But see here. There might still be life inside. Should we try to help it?" Adam nodded eagerly. "Can we put it back in the nest?" "The nest is probably too high up," August explained. "But we could make a safe place for it at home. Sometimes, with warmth and care, eggs that fall can still hatch." The metaphor wasn't lost on Natalie, whose eyes met August's over their son's head with a look of understanding. "Let's take it back to the house," she suggested, her voice gentle. "We'll make a nest box like the one we made for that sparrow egg in Boston. Remember?" Adam nodded solemnly, carefully cradling the egg as they turned back toward the cabin. As they walked, he slipped his free hand into August's with the easy trust of childhood, an unconscious gesture that nevertheless felt monumental. August swallowed hard, curling his fingers protectively around his son's smaller ones, his other hand moving almost of its own accord to rest lightly at the small of Natalie's back, guiding, supporting, connecting. Together, the three of them made their way home as the setting sun gilded the Montana prairie in shades of gold and promise. Over the next few weeks, a tentative routine emerged. August rode into town most mornings to spend time with Adam, sometimes taking him back to the ranch for the day, other times simply joining him and Natalie for walks along the creek or picnics in the meadow beyond Herbert's garden. Adam's robin's egg, carefully placed in a nest box lined with soft cloth and kept warm near the kitchen stove, became the object of the boy's devoted attention. Each morning, he checked for signs of hatching, his face a study in hope and determination. "It needs time," August explained gently after a week had passed with no change. "Some things can't be rushed, no matter how much we want them." Adam had considered this wisdom with his characteristic seriousness. "Like you and Mother?" he asked, displaying that uncanny perceptiveness that continually surprised August. Something like that, August had acknowledged, wondering how much the boy understood about the complexities of adult relationships, more than he had given him credit for, apparently. Adam had nodded sagely. Mother smiles different when you're around. Her eyes get crinkly at the corners. This observation had stayed with August, a small flame of hope he carefully tended as the days passed and summer ripened toward autumn. Natalie remained cautious, keeping a certain emotional distance even as she welcomed August's growing presence in their lives. Herbert's condition worsened gradually, his coughing fits more frequent, his strength visibly ebbing despite Natalie's medical knowledge and care. One evening in late August, as golden light slanted across the porch where August sat with Herbert while Natalie and Adam prepared supper inside, the older man broke a lengthy silence. "She's happier with you in her life again," he said, his voice raspy from the afternoon's coughing spell. "The boy, too." August studied Herbert's gaunt profile, surprised by this apparent olive branch. "I'm glad to hear you say that, sir." Herbert waved a dismissive hand. "Don't mistake me, Steele. I still think she could have done better than a frontier lawman turned rancher." His sharp eyes fixed on August. "But I was wrong to interfere as I did, pride, perhaps, or fear for her future." "You wanted to protect her," August acknowledged, finding it within himself to extend understanding to the dying man. "Any father would." "Including you, I imagine," Herbert said, glancing through the window where Adam could be seen setting the table, his tongue caught between his teeth in concentration. "You'd move heaven and earth to keep that boy safe and happy." "Without hesitation," August confirmed. Herbert nodded as if August had passed some test. "Then perhaps you understand why I did what I did, even if you can't forgive it." August considered his words carefully. "Forgiveness might take time, Mr. Greene, but understanding, yes, I think I can manage that much." A hint of a smile touched Herbert's lips. "Fair enough." He paused, then added with unexpected directness, "What are your intentions toward my daughter now, Steele? I may not have longed to see matters settled, but I'd like to know she and Adam will be provided for." The question, blunt as it was, deserved an honest answer. "I love her," August said simply. "I never stopped. If she'll have me, I intend to marry her and give Adam the family he deserves." He held the older man's gaze steadily. "But I won't rush her. She needs to be certain." Herbert studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "She could do worse, I suppose," he conceded, which from him was high praise indeed. "At least you've proven yourself capable of building something lasting." He gestured toward the horizon where August's ranch lay. "A man who can create a home from wilderness isn't without merit." Before August could respond, the front door opened and Natalie appeared, her cheeks flushed from the kitchen heat. "Supper's ready," she announced, her questioning gaze moving between her father and August, clearly sensing the shift in atmosphere. Herbert pushed himself up from his chair with effort. "Good. I find I have an appetite tonight." He moved past his daughter into the house, patting her arm as he went in a rare gesture of affection. Natalie turned to August, her eyebrow raised in question. "Just clearing the air," August said, offering her his arm as they followed Herbert inside. "Your father and I might be reaching an understanding of sorts." "Wonders never cease," Natalie murmured, though her tone was light, and the hand she placed on his arm lingered longer than strictly necessary. Supper that night was a pleasant affair, with Adam entertaining them all with a detailed account of the frog he'd caught and released by the creek that afternoon. Even Herbert joined in the conversation more than usual, asking his grandson questions about his observations and nodding approvingly at the boy's thoughtful answers. As the meal concluded, August found himself watching Natalie across the table, admiring the way the lamplight caught in her hair and the animation in her face as she listened to Adam's stories. When she glanced up and caught him looking, the smile she gave him carried a warmth that kindled hope in his chest. Later, after Adam had been tucked into bed and Herbert had retired for the night, August and Natalie sat on the porch swing, the same one where they had shared their first kiss years before. The night was clear, stars scattered like diamond dust across the velvet sky, a cool breeze carrying the scent of late summer flowers. "Father seems to be warming to you," Natalie observed, breaking a comfortable silence. "I never thought I'd see the day." August smiled, his arm resting along the back of the swing behind her shoulders, not quite touching. "Impending mortality has a way of shifting perspectives, I imagine." Natalie's expression sobered. "The doctor visited yesterday while you were at the ranch. He doesn't think Father will see Christmas." August reached for her hand, covering it with his own. "I'm sorry, Natalie." She turned her palm up, interlacing her fingers with his in a gesture that felt both familiar and new. "He's making peace with it, I think. And with you, which matters to me more than I expected it would." "And you," August asked softly, "are you making peace with the idea of us?" Natalie's gaze remained on their joined hands. "I've been cautious," she admitted, "for Adam's sake and my own." "You hurt me once, August, even if it wasn't entirely your doing." "I know," he acknowledged, "and I'd understand if you decided that risk was too great to take again." She looked up then, meeting his eyes in the dim light from the window. "But that's just it, seeing you with Adam these past weeks, watching how naturally you've stepped into being his father. It's made me realize that some risks are worth taking." Her voice softened. "I never stopped loving you either, August. I just buried it deep, convinced myself it was a chapter of my life that had closed." Hope surged in August's chest, but he tempered it with caution. "And now I think perhaps it was just paused, waiting for the right time to continue." She smiled, the full, unguarded smile he remembered from their youth. "I'm not saying it will be simple. We have 5 years to bridge and we've both changed in ways we're still discovering, but I'd like to try if you would." August brought their joined hands to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "I would," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "God knows I would, Natalie." The space between them seemed to shrink of its own accord, and then they were kissing, a gentle exploration that quickly deepened with the weight of years apart and feelings never truly forgotten. August's hand cradled her face, thumb stroking the softness of her cheek as Natalie's fingers curled into the fabric of his shirt, drawing him closer. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Natalie rested her forehead against his. "We should take this slowly," she murmured. "For all our sakes." "As slowly as you need," August agreed, though it took considerable restraint not to pull her back into his arms. "We have time now." They sat together a while longer, talking softly about practical matters, how often August would visit town, when Adam might stay at the ranch overnight, whether Herbert might indeed benefit from the country air as his condition worsened. Behind these logistical discussions lay the unspoken understanding that their separate lives were beginning, slowly but surely, to intertwine once more. When August finally took his leave, riding Thunder back to his ranch under the vast Montana sky, his heart felt lighter than it had in 5 long years. The future that had once seemed set in stone, a solitary existence punctuated by work and occasional visits to town, now shimmered with new possibilities. A family gathering around his table, Adam growing up strong and capable on the land August had claimed, Natalie by his side as they built something enduring together. It wouldn't be without challenges, he knew, 5 years of separation had left marks on both of them. But as he urged Thunder into a canter, eager to return home and begin preparing the cabin for the possibility, the hope of more frequent visitors, August found himself believing in second chances with a faith that bordered on certainty. The weeks that followed saw a gradual but unmistakable shift. Adam began staying at the ranch overnight on weekends, delighting in helping Josiah with the horses and following August around as he completed his daily chores. A spare bedroom was transformed into a space for the boy, with a small desk for his studies, shelves for his growing collection of interesting rocks and pine cones, and a window that looked out over the corral where Maple, now firmly established as his horse, grazed peacefully. Natalie visited regularly, sometimes staying for supper, other times joining August and Adam for all-day excursions into the foothills. On these occasions, August would catch her watching them with a soft expression that made his heart swell with hope and possibility. Herbert's condition continued to decline, but true to August's suggestion, they moved the old man to the ranch in early October, setting up a bed in the sunny front room where he could watch the changing seasons through the large windows. The fresh air seemed to ease his breathing somewhat, and having Adam nearby brought a light to his eyes that had been absent in town. One crisp morning, as golden aspen leaves drifted past the window, August found Herbert awake unusually early, gazing out at the mountains with a pensive expression. "Coffee?" August offered, holding out a steaming cup. Herbert accepted it with a nod of thanks, his hands trembling slightly as he cradled the warm mug. "You've built something good here, Steele," he said after a moment, his voice raspy but clear. "Something that will last." August settled into the chair beside the bed, sensing that the older man had more to say. "A man hopes to see his daughter well established before he goes," Herbert continued, his gaze still on the distant peaks. "Secure, happy." He took a sip of coffee before adding, "I see now that you can give her that perhaps better than the doctor in Boston ever could have." "I intend to try," August said simply. Herbert turned to look at him directly. "I've made my peace with my mistakes, Steele. Have you made peace with yours?" The question caught August off guard. "My mistakes? You let her go," Herbert reminded him, his tone matter-of-fact rather than accusatory. "Whatever my interference afterward, you had the chance to ask her to stay and you didn't take it." August considered this uncomfortable truth. "I thought I was doing what was best for her," he said finally. "Her dreams were in Boston, mine were here. I didn't want to be the man who clipped her wings. And now I know better than to make decisions for her," August replied honestly. "Whatever happens between us will be her choice as much as mine." Herbert nodded, apparently satisfied. "Good." He paused, then added with unexpected directness, "She keeps her grandmother's ring in a blue velvet pouch in her jewelry box. Sarah's ring. It would please her to see Natalie wear it, I think, when the time comes." The implicit blessing for that was what it was struck August deeply. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I'll remember that." Herbert waved a dismissive hand, as if embarrassed by the moment of sentimentality. "See that you do, and pour me more coffee, would you? It's one of the few pleasures left to me." August complied, recognizing the conversation had reached its natural conclusion. As he left Herbert to enjoy the sunrise, he found Natalie in the kitchen, already preparing breakfast for the household. "Is father awake?" she asked, looking up from the biscuit dough she was kneading. "And dispensing wisdom with his usual forthrightness," August confirmed, coming to stand beside her at the table. Unable to resist, he brushed a smudge of flour from her cheek, letting his fingers linger against her skin. Natalie leaned into his touch, her eyes meeting his with a warmth that made his pulse quicken. He's been doing that rather often lately. I suspect he's trying to put his affairs in order in his own way. August nodded, understanding all too well the need to leave things settled. He loves you, Natalie, in his own complicated way. I know, she acknowledged, returning her attention to the biscuits. Just as I love him despite everything. She glanced up with a small smile. Life rarely gives us uncomplicated relationships, does it? Rarely, August agreed, thinking of his own father and the complex legacy he'd left behind. But perhaps that's what makes them valuable. Natalie's hands stilled in their work. August, she said softly, I've been thinking about what comes next, after father. She couldn't quite complete the thought. You don't have to decide anything now, August assured her, resisting the urge to pull her into his arms, mindful of Adam who might appear at any moment. Whatever you and Adam need, whenever you need it, I'm here. Gratitude flickered in her eyes along with something deeper. I know you are, that's what makes this easier. She took a deep breath. I'd like for Adam and me to stay, August, here at the ranch with you, not just visits, but home. The simple declaration sent a wave of joy through August so intense he had to steady himself against the table. Are you sure? He asked, hardly daring to believe it could be this straightforward after so much complexity. I am, Natalie confirmed, her voice growing stronger. These past weeks have shown me what could be possible for us, for all of us. Adam is flourishing here. I've never seen him so happy, so confident. Her eyes met August's with certainty. And I find that my own happiness is increasingly tied to being where you are. August didn't trust himself to speak. Overcome by the fulfillment of hopes he'd scarcely allowed himself to acknowledge. Instead, he closed the distance between them, one hand cradling her face as he kissed her with all the emotion he couldn't put into words: gratitude, joy, love that had endured separation and misunderstanding to emerge stronger. Natalie responded with equal fervor, her flour-dusted hands coming to rest against his chest, leaving white prints on his shirt that neither of them noticed or cared about. They broke apart at the sound of small footsteps on the stairs, Adam appearing in the doorway a moment later, his hair tousled from sleep, bare, the puppy August had brought home for him 2 weeks earlier, bounding at his heels. Mourning, he said through a yawn, seemingly unsurprised to find his parents in an embrace. Is breakfast ready? I'm starving. Natalie laughed, the sound bright with happiness. Almost. Why don't you help your father set the table while I finish these biscuits? Adam nodded agreeably, moving to the cabinet where the plates were kept. Can we go fishing after breakfast? You promised to show me how to tie a new kind of fly, remember? I remember, August confirmed, ruffling his son's hair as he passed. Though we should check on your grandfather first. He's awake early today. As they moved around the kitchen, working together with the easy rhythm of a family who had known each other all their lives instead of mere weeks, August found himself marveling at how completely his solitary existence had been transformed. The cabin that had once echoed with his solitary footsteps now resonated with Adam's laughter, Natalie's voice, even Herbert's occasional sharp observations. It wasn't the life he had planned, but it was infinitely better than anything he could have imagined for himself. Herbert Greene passed peacefully in his sleep 3 weeks later, on a clear November morning when the first dusting of snow had transformed the landscape into a glittering wonderland. Adam had been the one to discover him, going in to show his grandfather a particularly intricate snowflake that had landed on the window. The boy had known immediately, with that uncanny perception of his, that something had changed. He's gone to be with grandmother now, isn't he? He asked Natalie, who had come running at his call. Yes, sweetheart, she'd confirmed, gathering him close as August checked for a pulse he knew wouldn't be there. He isn't suffering anymore. The funeral was held in town, attended by nearly everyone in Whisper Creek. Herbert had been a fixture in the community for over 2 decades, and despite his often prickly nature, he had been respected for his dedication to education and his unwavering principles. Former students, now grown with children of their own, came to pay their respects to the man who had taught them their letters and numbers, history and science. As Natalie stood beside the grave, Adam's hand clasped firmly in hers and August a steady presence at her other side, she received the condolences of the townspeople with quiet dignity. August noticed, however, the slight trembling of her fingers when they returned to the ranch afterward, the way her composure threatened to crack as she moved through the familiar rooms now emptied of her father's formidable presence. That evening, after Adam had been tucked into bed, August found her on the porch, wrapped in a shawl against the November chill, staring out at the star-filled sky. "You should come inside," he said gently. "It's getting cold." Natalie shook her head. "I needed some air, some space too." She gestured vaguely, unable to articulate exactly what she needed. August nodded, understanding without words. "Would you like me to leave you alone?" "No." Her response was immediate, her hand reaching for his. "Stay with me, please." He settled beside her on the porch swing, drawing her against his side, offering warmth and silent support. For a long while, they sat without speaking, the only sound the soft creaking of the swing and the distant call of an owl from the trees beyond the corral. "It's strange," Natalie said finally. "Father and I had such a complicated relationship. He was controlling, stubborn, convinced he always knew best." She paused. "But he was also brilliant, principled, and in his own way devoted to my happiness. I'm not sure I ever fully understood him." Few of us ever fully understand our parents, August reflected. They remain mysteries in some ways even after they're gone. Natalie turned her face into his shoulder, her voice muffled. "He gave me his blessing, you know, for us. The night before he died, when you were putting Adam to bed, he called me to his side and told me he was glad I'd found my way back to you." August tightened his arm around her, his throat constricting with unexpected emotion. "I didn't know. He said you would give me the security he'd always wanted for me, but also the freedom he hadn't understood I needed." She looked up, her eyes glistening with unshed tears in the moonlight. "He was right, August. You've never tried to contain me or direct my path. Even now, you've made it clear that whatever I choose to do, continue my medical studies, stay here at the ranch, both you'll support my decision." "Because I love you," August said simply. "All of you, not just the parts that fit conveniently into my life." A tear slipped down Natalie's cheek and August brushed it away with his thumb. "I loved him," she whispered. "Despite everything, I loved him so much." "I know," August murmured, drawing her closer as the tears she'd been holding back all day finally broke free. "I know you did." He held her as she cried, her grief pouring out against his chest, his shirt growing damp with her tears. He didn't offer empty platitudes or attempt to stem the tide of her sorrow. Instead, he simply provided the sanctuary of his embrace, a safe harbor where she could weather the storm of her loss. When her tears finally subsided, leaving her exhausted but somehow lighter, August pressed a kiss to her temple. "Better?" he asked softly. Natalie nodded, not moving from the circle of his arms. "Thank you," she said, her voice rough from crying, "for understanding, for being here." "Always," he promised. Then, after a moment's contemplation, he added, "There's something I've been wanting to ask you, but it never seemed like the right time. Given today's events, it might still not be, but—" He drew a deep breath. "I don't want to waste any more time than we already have." Natalie pulled back slightly to look at him, her eyes questioning. "What is it?" August reached into his pocket, withdrawing a small object that gleamed in the moonlight, a delicate gold ring set with a single pearl surrounded by tiny diamonds. "Your father told me about your grandmother's ring," he explained. "He thought she would have wanted you to have it. I found it where he said it would be." Natalie's breath caught, her hand flying to her mouth. "August, I'm not asking because of your father's passing or out of some sense of obligation," August continued, his voice steady despite the rapid beating of his heart. "I'm asking because I love you, Natalie. I've loved you since that summer day by the creek when you told me all your dreams of becoming a doctor, and I've never stopped, not even when I thought you were lost to me forever." He took her hand, his eyes never leaving hers. "I want to build a life with you and Adam. I want to wake up beside you every morning and fall asleep with you every night. I want to support your dreams, whatever they may be, and create new ones together." He smiled slightly. "I'm not a man of fancy words, Natalie, but I am a man who knows his own heart. And my heart has always belonged to you." Tears welled in Natalie's eyes again, but of a different nature than before. "Ask me," she whispered. August slid from the swing to one knee before her, the ring held between them like a promise. "Natalie Greene, will you marry me?" Her answer was immediate and unhesitating. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking on the word. "Yes, August, I will marry you." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, as if it had been made for her alone, August felt a sense of rightness settle over him, like the final piece of a puzzle falling into place. He rose, drawing Natalie to her feet and into his arms, sealing their engagement with a kiss that held all the promise of their future together. When they finally parted, Natalie rested her forehead against his, her hands framing his face. "I was so afraid," she admitted softly. "Afraid that too much time had passed, that too much had changed. Afraid that the love we had was something that belonged to our youth, not to who we are now." "And now?" August asked, his hands warm at her waist. A smile bloomed on her face, radiant even in the dim light. "Now I know that what we had was just the beginning, that the love we're building now is stronger, deeper, because of everything we've endured to find our way back to each other." August returned her smile, his heart full to bursting. "Sounds like a solid foundation for a marriage to me." "The best," Natalie agreed, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "But there's something you should know, August Steele." "What's that?" Her eyes sparkled with a mixture of mischief and solemnity. "I still intend to finish my medical training. This territory needs doctors, and I won't be satisfied until I've fulfilled that part of my dream." August laughed, the sound rich with happiness. "I wouldn't have it any other way, Dr. Greene, or soon to be Dr. Steele, I suppose." "Dr. Steele," Natalie repeated, as if testing how it sounded. "I like that, though it might confuse people when they come looking for the doctor and find a rancher instead." "I'll direct them to the smarter, more capable Steele in the family," August promised, drawing her close again. "Now, future Dr. Steele, I think it's time we went inside. We have a wedding to plan, and I have a feeling our son will have some very decided opinions on the matter once we tell him the news." Natalie laughed, the sound carrying across the quiet ranch like music. "No doubt. He's been dropping hints about wanting us to be a real family for weeks now." Hand in hand, they walked back into the warmth of the cabin, their home, now and for all the days to come. The wedding took place on Christmas Eve, a date chosen partially for its romantic associations, and partially because it allowed sufficient time for Natalie to emerge from the immediate period of mourning for her father. The ceremony was held in the town church, decorated with evergreen boughs and red berries, candles casting a warm glow over the gathered community. Adam, resplendent in a new suit and clearly aware of the importance of his role, carried the rings on a small velvet pillow, his face a study in concentration as he walked carefully down the aisle. Josiah stood as August's best man, the old cowhand uncharacteristically emotional as he watched his employer and friend take his vows. Natalie wore her mother's wedding dress, altered slightly to fit her more slender frame, with a crown of winter roses in her dark hair. When she appeared at the church doors, August felt his heart stop for a moment before resuming at double speed. She was radiant, her eyes finding his immediately as she began her walk toward their future together. The reception afterward was held at the hotel, its dining room transformed for the occasion with greenery and white ribbons. The townspeople of Whisper Creek came together to celebrate not just the union of two well-liked residents, but the official formation of a family that had already begun to weave itself into the fabric of the community. As August and Natalie shared their first dance as husband and wife, Adam watching proudly from Josiah's side, August bent to whisper in her ear, "Happy." Natalie's smile was answer enough, but she replied nonetheless, completely. "And you?" "More than I ever thought possible," August admitted, drawing her closer as they moved in time to the music. "Though there's one more surprise I've been saving." Natalie looked up at him curiously. "What sort of surprise?" "I've arranged for Dr. Wilson from Helena to visit once a month," August explained. "He's agreed to continue your medical training under his supervision. It won't be a formal university education, but with your previous studies and his guidance, you could still qualify for certification in a year or two." Natalie stopped dancing, staring at him in disbelief. "August, that's how did you? I wrote to your former instructor in Boston," he explained, enjoying her astonishment. He provided a letter of recommendation and suggested Dr. Wilson, who apparently studied at the same medical college. The arrangements were finalized yesterday. Tears of joy welled in Natalie's eyes. "You've given me everything," she whispered. "A home, a family, and now the chance to fulfill my dream without having to choose between it and the people I love." "You deserve it all," August said simply, brushing away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. "And so much more." Their moment was interrupted by Adam, who had apparently grown tired of watching and now tugged at August's jacket. "May I dance with Mother?" he asked formally, clearly having rehearsed the question. August laughed, stepping back with a bow. "Of course, son, she's all yours." As Natalie was led away by their beaming child, August moved to the edge of the dance floor, watching his family with a heart so full it seemed impossible it could be contained within his chest. Josiah appeared at his side, offering a glass of whiskey. "Fine day," the old man observed, his own gaze following Natalie and Adam as they performed an improvised dance that had more enthusiasm than technique. "The finest," August agreed, accepting the drink. Josiah raised his glass in a toast. "To second chances," he said gruffly. "Don't come around often, but when they do, they are sweeter than the first time around." August clinked his glass against his friend's. "To second chances," he echoed, knowing the truth of those words in the deepest part of his soul. The celebration continued well into the evening, but eventually the newly formed Steele family made their way back to the ranch, Adam falling asleep in the wagon before they were halfway home. August carried him inside, tucking him into bed while Natalie looked on, her hand resting on the doorframe. "He didn't even wake up to say good night," she marveled as August gently removed the boy's shoes. "Too much excitement," August replied, pulling the blanket up to Adam's chin. "He'll be up at dawn, though, eager to see what Santa brought." They stood together for a moment, watching their son sleep, before August took Natalie's hand and led her to their room now, officially and forever. The space had been transformed in preparation for their marriage, with new curtains Natalie had sewn, a larger bed August had commissioned from the town's carpenter, and a dressing table where her silver-backed brush now lay beside the shaving kit that had been his father's. "Welcome home, Mrs. Steele," August said softly, closing the door behind them. Natalie turned to him, her eyes luminous in the lamplight. "I've been home since the moment I found you again," she whispered, reaching up to trace the outline of his face as if memorizing it by touch. "Everything else was just waiting." August caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm before drawing her into his arms. "No more waiting," he promised, bending to capture her lips with his. "Not ever again." Later, as moonlight spilled through the window and Natalie slept peacefully beside him, August reflected on the unlikely journey that had brought them to this moment. 5 years of separation, a knock at his door, a whispered question about a child who had his eyes all leading to this perfect contentment, this sense of completion he had never known was possible. Outside, the Montana winter wrapped the ranch in stillness, stars glittering like diamonds above the snow-covered landscape. Inside, August Steele held his wife close and gave thanks for second chances, for love that endured against all odds, and for the family that had found its way home at last. 5 years later, the Steele ranch had flourished, expanding to include more cattle, better grazing land, and a reputation for some of the finest horses in the territory. The cabin had grown as well, with a new wing added to accommodate not just Adam, now a strapping 10-year-old with his father's steady hands and his mother's quick mind, but also 3-year-old twins, Sarah and Samuel, who had arrived to complete the family circle. Natalie had indeed achieved her dream of becoming a doctor, the first female physician in the county. Her small practice, operated from an addition to their home, served the women and children of Whisper Creek and the surrounding homesteads, her gentle competence earning her the respect of even the most traditional ranchers. August had never returned to law enforcement, finding his calling in the land, and in raising his children to understand the value of hard work, honesty, and compassion. Together with Natalie, he had built not just a successful ranch but a haven, a place where their family could grow strong, and where the wounds of the past had fully healed into the scars of wisdom. On the anniversary of their first meeting after those 5 long years apart, August and Natalie often walked to the creek where Adam had found that robin's egg, which had indeed hatched against all odds. The bird, long since flown to freedom, had left behind an empty nest that August had preserved in a glass case in their parlor, a reminder that with care and patience, new life could emerge from the most precarious beginnings. Just as their love had done, surviving separation and misunderstanding to bloom stronger and more resilient than before. Just as their family had done, growing from a tentative reunion on a porch step to the vibrant, joyful household that now filled the Montana prairie with laughter and possibility. And when visitors asked, as they sometimes did, how the Steeles had found their way to such evident happiness, August would share a smile with Natalie before answering simply, "Sometimes the longest journeys lead right back to where you're meant to be. You just have to be brave enough to open the door when opportunity knocks."